technique, abruptly interrupting Chu mid-sentence. Chu continued to murmur something incoherent, beginning to slump onto his back, lulled to sleep by a specialized spiritual technique. And soon, Chu's consciousness completely faded. One of the accompanying warriors marveled at how the young lord, with such a youthful face, managed to single-handedly defeat the gang of mountain bandits. Huang, on the other hand, requested that Chu's pivotal role in the victory over the 9 dragons not be mentioned in the report. Reputation in Muriam was hard-won, and the more fame one gained, the more troubles it attracted. Huang truly cherished his young lord, and didn't wish such a fate for him. Unfortunately, he didn't know what awaited Chu in the future. Agreed upon that Jin had dealt with the mountain bandits, the false name Chu used during his journey, so public attention wouldn't be directed at him. Chu, however, didn't hear any of this conversation. He was in a realm of sleep, lying in a swaying carriage that was taking him home. Meanwhile, in the cave beneath the waterfall where Chu had dug up the ginseng, several people were present. They had arrived late and only found a hole in the ground where the plant had recently been. The servant of chaos fell to his knees, inspecting the disturbed earth. His accompanying attendants were concerned by their master's behavior, and were about to approach him. The servant's master interrupted their voices. The virgin ginseng meant for their young master had disappeared. A dark aura began to thicken around the white-haired man. The man was engulfed in a wave of anger, and the dark aura grew denser, unsettling the attendants with its oppressive atmosphere. Silence descended upon the cave. Like a friend, the white-haired man completely lost control of his anger, and it began seeping outward, exerting pressure on those gathered there. The attendants took a step back. Suddenly they started gasping for air, clutching their throats as if trying to remove an invisible grip that was choking them like a vice. One by one, they slumped to the ground. With great effort, one of the attendants managed to call out to their organization's leader. At this rate, he would kill them all. With each passing moment, the pressure increased, bringing death closer to his subordinates. But suddenly, the leader calmed down. The pressure vanished, and nothing remained to remind them of what had happened just a second ago. The dark aura dissipated, restoring the cave to its previous state. The attendants could breathe easily once again. Now that the pressure had disappeared, the danger was over. Gathering his thoughts, the leader called out to one of his apprentices, who immediately responded to his leader's call. Rising slowly to his feet, the leader stated the obvious. A thief had been here. The ginseng was gone. He needed to return to the Golden Palace and assist their young master. As for tracking down the unknown thief, he assigned that task to one of his attendants. He needed to find him, recover the ginseng at any cost, even if he had to rip open his stomach, and then beat all of his relatives, friends, and the friends of his relatives. Chu sat in the carriage, succumbing to despondency. He had a chance to kill the servant of chaos right there on the spot where the ginseng grew. But now that opportunity had slipped away. He could have spent the rest of his life in comfort without any worries. But cursed Huang ruined everything. Now he would have to suffer in achieving his goal. Huang informed Chu that they were almost there, and mentioned a letter from his father, stating that he couldn't wait any longer and took poison to meet him. Huang simply ignored all of Chu's complaints. In the end, the moment was missed, and there's no use dwelling on it unnecessarily. There's no point in turning back anymore. At least half of Chu's plan worked. He managed to obtain the ginseng right under their noses. They were approaching the capital of the prefecture, the city of Hefei. The long journey by carriage was almost over. After the chaos arrived, Chu had only seen training halls, so the city was a novelty to him. It was a large city with a water canal running through its center. The city was beautiful and well-maintained. Chu had never seen anything like it before. Peaceful streets where people traded calmly, walking from stall to stall, purchasing items according to their taste. Street performers entertained all who desired. Finally arriving at their destination, Huang decided to release Chu on the condition that he wouldn't attempt to escape. Chu's body had become stiff. It seemed that he was just a little away from dying in that cramped carriage. Chu stood before the imperial gates, examining the architecture. It all clearly matched the level of confidence in the Namgung family. As he prepared to pass through the gates, Chu was stopped by a gatekeeper who blocked his path with a sword. A familiar situation for Chu, but this time, in the inner courtyard, Chu's father appeared and ordered the newcomers to be allowed in. Seeing his father, a smile appeared on Chu's face. The expressions of a loving person clearly showed all his concerns for his son. Chu decided that at least this time he would play the role of a dutiful son. Spreading his arms wide, he wanted to embrace his father, but his father, with a red face from anger, walked past him towards Huang. Pouncing on Huang, he began demanding to know where Chu was. In the letter, Chu indicated that they were traveling together. Did Huang really try to deceive him? Chu's father's anger didn't subside, but Huang managed to utter some words, pointing at Chu with his hand. Glancing at Chu, he didn't recognize him and continued shaking Huang by the chest, questioning how he dared to mock him. This slender and charming bandit couldn't possibly be his son. Chu attempted to correct the situation by addressing his father and revealing his relationship with him. Huang was telling the truth after all. He looked at Chu with wide-open eyes and couldn't believe it. Could this really be his son? After struggling with himself, he finally let go of Huang. Chu smiled at him warmly, and his father still couldn't believe that the person before him was his son. Could it truly be? Approaching closer, all Chu's father could manage was to ask why. Oh, these people. His son had returned from his journey and he was already starting in on him. Deep night at the Namgung estate. The full moon illuminated the night beauty of the city with its silvery disk, giving it an air of mystery. Inside the house, in one of the rooms, a dialogue was taking place among 3 individuals. One of the warriors was giving a report about the recent events. He revealed that according to the initial version, it was the work of a man named Jin. However, in reality, the young Lord Chu had single-handedly dealt with all the bandits. One of the men with distinct features of the Namgung clan was surprised. He managed to handle a gang of bandits all by himself. But the information had been verified. The man still couldn't believe it. Could the warriors have been mistaken? But no, it really was the case. Furthermore, when they tried to capture Chu, he successfully resisted, and they had a hard time capturing him. A younger man tried to object, attributing everything to the negligence of the leader of the Heavenly Squad and Huang's bodyguard. He claimed he wouldn't believe in such tall tales. However, the leader of the Heavenly Squad disagreed. They deployed all their forces, excluding lethal techniques, to capture the young lord. But the man refused to believe. The elder Namgung began to criticize his son's lack of foresight, how he had let such a talented young man slip through his fingers, and how he had even become more handsome after losing weight. How could he believe some rumors and then deny obvious facts? Rising from his seat, the man decided to independently settle the matter of marriage, forbidding his son from meddling in it in any way. The next day, 3 people gathered around a table: Chu, his father, and the elder Namgung. The elders were engaged in conversation over a glass of strong drink. Chu sat, internally annoyed by the situation. Not only were these people drinking early in the morning, but now they were bothering him for some reason. But his thoughts were interrupted by his father's suggestion to take the state examination. Chu had no desire whatsoever to take on additional responsibilities. He already had to save the world. Suddenly, Namgung decided to speak up, drawing attention to himself. He began to speak, stating that military service would only waste Chu's talents. He argued that Chu would at most become a general, and the training was completely different. Chu didn't know where this old man was going, but he was already liking it. Chu's father listened attentively to his speech. In the end, he suggested finding an exceptional teacher for Chu, someone who would help him develop his skills to unprecedented heights and enter history as the savior of the state. The last words deeply impressed Chu's father. He had always wanted the best for his son, perhaps even too much. However, Chu's father couldn't understand where to find such a teacher. But as it turned out, there was no need to search at all, since the very teacher they needed was right in front of them. Namgung Chan, the Sword King, and the former head of the Namgung clan. Such a person could undoubtedly polish Chu's talent according to his own convictions. At least that's what Chan believed. Chu sat and listened with a satisfied expression. Of course, a martial arts genius who single-handedly defeated mountain bandits would be an enviable student for any master. Chu pondered the possibility of becoming a disciple. Unlike the other 9 schools, they left a good impression. The Namgung family was one of the most renowned. Chu thought about how he could achieve much in the world of Murim with the name of the Namgung clan behind him. It would also provide an opportunity to distance himself from the Yu family. Chu only needed to convince his father of this. But as it turned out, his father was also delighted that Chan was willing to become his son's teacher. He radiated happiness and gratitude. These two reached an agreement without any problems. They even managed to determine their relationship with Chu. In fact, Chan acknowledged Chu as his own son. Chu's father mentioned that he had been concerned when he learned about the troubles troubling the emperor's mind. But now that Chan had agreed to watch over Chu, he felt much lighter and happier. Chan speculated that the emperor's concerns must be related to his thoughts about the throne's future. In that case, the emperor wants Wang to be close to his heir, as he is knowledgeable and can teach the future emperor many things. The emperor trusts him a lot. It was time for Chu's father to return. Sitting in the carriage, he advised his son to listen to his uncle and do well in training. Chu's father continued to give advice, turning the whole situation into something resembling a farce. But when the carriage started moving, it seemed Chu's torment was over. As his father and Huang appeared on the map, they continued waving as the carriage moved away. Chu couldn't wait for them to leave. He felt quite embarrassed. Nonetheless, Chu found it pleasant to experience such love and attention. It was something he had been deprived of in his previous life. Chu's uncle suddenly addressed him and told him to follow him. Leading the way, he walked ahead. Chu couldn't understand. Were the training sessions starting right away, just after he had said goodbye to his father? They moved together across the clan's territory, with all the people they met bowing and smiling at Lord Chan. They clearly were happy to see him. Chu was interested in this treatment of the former leader. After a while, they began to approach a staircase that led upwards. 2 guards were guarding the staircase, standing on either side. But upon seeing Chan, they didn't even consider stopping them. They ascended the wall that separated the city from the outside world. The wall was quite high, and from here, a beautiful view of the picturesque surroundings opened up. Upon reaching the roof of one of the wall sections, Chan simply walked through the air, as expected from the current Sword King, the step of the Great Void. Even his previous teacher didn't possess such a level of mastery. Standing on the rooftop, Chan stared at Chu, motioning for him to follow. Chu pondered. He couldn't use certain techniques now, as they would raise too many questions. Therefore, Chu simply decided to jump onto the roof. Crouching down and gathering energy in his legs, he prepared to jump. It was quite simple, and it would avoid unnecessary questions. Chu easily managed to jump onto the roof, standing next to his Uncle Chan. Now, he only needed to understand why they had come here. Chan complimented him on his ability to control his body. Approaching the edge of the rooftop that faced away from the city, they both froze, and Chan initiated a conversation. He asked Chu about the number of places he had visited, according to Chu's opinion. Chu tensed up. Was this a test of his vigilance? He had been too relaxed, but Chan continued, revealing that he had visited a total of 64 places, all of which belonged to the Namgung family. The words about belonging to the Namgung family struck a chord with Chu. He couldn't understand. At the same time, Chan continued, asking him to look in the specified direction. His finger pointed to a building in the distance. It was a gazebo located on a hill. Chan then traced with his finger from place to place as if drawing an invisible boundary in front of the eyes, outlining the territory he wanted to show. Everything Chu saw, as it turned out, belonged to the Namgung family. It covered quite a large area. His family owned a vast expanse of land. The city beneath them was very beautiful in the rays of the setting sun. Chu couldn't understand where Chan was leading with this. And yet, Chan continued to marvel at the expanses of his family's property, as if hinting at something. Chu started to feel a false sense of unease. Chan asked Chu what he thought about what he saw before him. Chu didn't understand where this old man was heading. Was this some kind of test or something else? Chu pondered. Did Chan want him to run back and forth? Something like a demonstration of his movement skills, a showcase of his speed, Chu guessed. What a troublesome old man, thought Chu, already preparing for a dash. All he needed was to prove the strength of his abilities. Crouching for a low start, Chu began to infuse his legs with spiritual energy. But he was interrupted by Chan's voice, praising the beauty and wealth of these places. This made Chu stumble. His foot slipped, throwing off his balance, and he embarrassingly fell, hitting his head. Chu decided to admit his lack of mental abilities and turned to Chan for clarification. He had completely lost the meaning of this conversation. Chan smiled kindly and looked at Chu, telling him that he was leading up to the fact that a portion of these lands could become his. Chu was very surprised by these words. Could this land really belong to him? He thought they had come here for training, not a geography lesson from the Namgung clan. Chan continued to smile and said that there was nothing to be surprised about. As soon as Chu married he would give a part of all this as a dowry. A very tempting offer, as Chan thought. Hearing this, Chu was shocked. Did he really come here just for this conversation? Chan confirmed that they were here solely for this purpose. Chu was speechless. After all, what did he expect from a person who was trying with all his might to seduce him and marry his granddaughter? Chan thought that Chu was contemplating because he might not want to marry him. He continued to assert that he could convince her, and Chu shouldn't worry. No longer wanting to listen to him, Chu approached the edge of the roof and jumped down. What nonsense, he thought. Not planning to start a family anytime soon. Chu managed to land softly on the ground, using his spiritual power to slow down the fall and avoid injuring himself. And Chu started to run away from Chan in this conversation. He didn't need any of this. What he needed was to become stronger, and he wouldn't find that in family life. But Chan wasn't going to let him go that easily, and chased after him. Chu was fast, but Chan was faster for now. Believing that he had offered too little, he tried to persuade Chu on the go, promising more. Realizing that running was futile, Chu stopped, deciding to clarify all the unsaid moments. Chu wasn't planning to get married, despite all the promised wealth. Chu began to present arguments to the bewildered Chan. He was a son of the Yu family, which already owned a lot of territory, and the emperor favored them. Merchants were willing to do almost anything for them. So there was no point in marrying for property. Finishing the conversation, Chu made it clear to Chan that he should forget about the wedding. He had actually expected Chan to teach him martial arts, not propose a marriage. But Chan didn't give up. Who if not he, who had achieved everything with his sword, could overcome any obstacles? He didn't consider that Chu was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, so offering him silver made no sense. Chan executed a series of strikes from a single technique, trying to impress Chu in this way. His movements were smooth yet sharp at the same time. On the other hand, Chu wasn't pleased with engaging in something unclear so early in the morning. Did all old men really wake up this early? Chu pondered. Concluding the demonstration, Chan inquired of Chu how he found what he had seen. It was the art of the royal sword, something that should impress anyone, but not Chu. Seeing Chu's unimpressed expression, Chan decided to show him something else. He threw his sword. It was a technique called energy restraint. The sword, obedient to its master's will, began to cut through the trees in the training area. Chu was only concerned about the fact that such trees were surely expensive. Breathing heavily, Chan tried to catch his breath and asked if Chu was impressed this time. These combat teachings were only passed down to direct descendants. Chan promised Chu that if he married he could gain all his knowledge. While Chan spoke, Chu's patience waned. He wasn't going to listen about marriage again. Chan was already desperate. He was offering knowledge that only direct descendants possessed, and it couldn't be learned even with money. But Chu was deaf to his persuasions. Chan decided to suggest that Chu master something from the Namgung family's martial arts. But in Chu's eyes, there was nothing special about them. Hearing this, Chan burst into loud laughter. Chan thought that while Chu was talented, he had only recently started to learn martial arts. He believed Chu couldn't see the whole picture, not grasping the true power of his art. Chu suggested demonstrating what he saw. If Chu could show that he wasn't interested, maybe Chan would leave him alone. If Chu demonstrates that he isn't interested, maybe then Chan will let go of him. He picked up a stick from the ground, intending to use it as a sword. Chu had managed to study Namgung's art enough. They used it to beat him. Chu started waving the twig, pretending to try and recall how Chan did it, causing only confusion for him. But then Chu became more serious and started replicating exactly what Chan had shown him. Without making a single mistake, he executed the art of the royal sword, astonishing Chan. But suddenly Chan abruptly stopped Chu. He became angry. Chu couldn't have learned this style, so how did he know it? It deeply concerned him. But with an innocent face, Chu assured him that Chan himself had taught him this. It struck Chan like lightning. He really had shown Chu that move. Chan was amazed. Chu had grasped the art of the royal sword with just one glance. He had clearly underestimated Chu, a genius sent from the heavens. Chan was lost in thought, thinking that Chu was a genius that couldn't be found anywhere else. Chu tried to reach Chan, but he continued to stand still without blinking. Chu grew tired of just standing there and decided to leave. Discarding the stick, he continued on with his tasks. Now he definitely wouldn't have to marry anyone. Meanwhile, Chan was ignited with the idea of marrying Chu to he after all. This guy was clearly worth the effort. Chan had to get him by any means necessary. At the same time, 3 men in broad straw hats arrived in the city. They were the Chaos Servants who had lost the ginseng and were now searching for the thief. Approaching the city center, they decided to split up and continue the search individually to expand the coverage area. They followed Chu's path, bribing the owner of the tavern where he had stayed. They managed to find out that the thief's name was Jin, but didn't realize it was a fake name used by Chu. The young man stood in front of the estate, looking for his Uncle Chu. He still hadn't shown up at the training ground for some reason. Chu exited the building and noticed his nephew. He was calling him for a training session that he was supposed to conduct. However, Chu wasn't interested, so he decided to send the young man to practice on his own. But the young man was persistent. In the past, Chu would have been frightened by such a look, but now his teacher even seemed somewhat endearing. The young man was simmering with anger. He didn't like Chu at all, although he had heard from his uncle that Chu was incredibly talented. What did it matter if Chu could replicate the technique he had seen only once? Looking at Chu's yawning face, he continued to ponder that a true master wasn't just about exceptional physical attributes, but also diligent training of internal strength. The young man couldn't sense any formidable energy from Chu, and Chu himself was tired of standing there, so he went back into the house to continue his rest. The young man was becoming furious, for now he was trying to reason with Chan, but his respected uncle should come with him. Chu's previous teacher had dug his own grave with his own hands, and Chu was going to make him pay for it. And then, a brilliant idea popped into Chu's head. What if they switched places, and he would be the one to educate this young man? A wicked grin spread across Chu's lips. Chu decided to explain that he couldn't teach him anything new. Instead, he was going to teach the young man. The young man was getting increasingly furious. He addressed Chu politely and maintained his manners. But where did Chu get so much arrogance from? Chu found the situation amusing. The young man decided to beat Chu and force him into training by sheer strength, wishing him luck in this endeavor, which Chu responded to by calling him nephew. The young man was further incensed by how Chu addressed him. Although Chu didn't show it, he had merely referred to his nephew as a captive. What was the big deal? The young man lost his temper. He started yelling at Chu, accusing him of unprecedented insolence and shamelessness that could pierce the heavens. Chu was taken aback. After the young man had actively provoked him, all he had heard about himself was being labeled as insolent. For that, he could have come up with stronger words. Observing the contorted expression on the young man's face, Chu thought that he had simply taken the bait, although he was barely holding back. Perhaps it was worth continuing and finally driving him over the edge. Chu decided to push further. His nephew had shifted from formal communication. Chu noticed it and spat at his feet, eliciting another tirade about insolence. The young man was shaking with anger but didn't know what to do. No one had ever insulted him before, and he had never used foul language, so he was clueless in this situation. Chu recalled how Sun cursed every day when he taught him, inventing new insults towards Chu. So Chu thought he must be accustomed to cursing since infancy. No one could defeat Sun in swordplay. He earned the nickname King of the Seven Senses. Within each person, there are 7 senses, 7 emotions. Sun was the person who united them and formed the martial art. Perhaps that's why he would beat Chu every morning when he was in a bad mood. And after a good lunch, Chu would receive laughter from a cheerful Sun. When it rained and Sun felt melancholic, he would become Chu because he was sad. Chu found it really challenging because how do you adjust to the character of someone whose mood changes 12 times a day? And what about now? Now Chu saw before him a cultured gentleman who was doing his best to contain his emotions. And yet, he had ascended to the peak, elevating his emotions to the absolute. Chu didn't want one of the heroes of Murim to disappear, but he couldn't just fix the situation. Now he had to change Sun's character. A difficult task lay ahead for Chu, but it didn't sadden him. On the contrary, a menacing smile and a grim expression were his response to challenges. Sun didn't understand what Chu was so fired up about, but Chu decided not to explain everything again. Now he would beat him, and Sun would have to figure it out on his own. Chu quickly approached the young man. Sun recognized the movement, the step of the heavenly wind. How dare this pathetic imitator be so audacious? Sun wanted to show him what an original and a fake were. Sun unleashed a flurry of strikes on Chu, attacking relentlessly, but Chu effortlessly evaded all his blows. The time had come for Chu to strike. Performing a pirouette in the air, Chu kicked him, sending Sun flying. But Sun managed to block Chu's strike, avoiding serious damage. At the same time, Chu continued to taunt him, criticizing his defense. Chu persisted in pressuring Sun. In a single rush, he closed the distance, preparing to attack again. Sun concentrated, channeling his spiritual energy and preparing to counterattack and force Chu to retreat. Suddenly, Sun sensed something amiss. Chu also decided to strike using his spiritual energy, gathering it into his fist. He surged towards Sun and was ready to strike. The distance between them rapidly closed, and Chu had a wide grin on his face. Sun recognized this strike. Chu had used it against him before. Block and strike collided, initiating a confrontation of spiritual power. Sun held on with all his might, but Chu's momentum was too strong. He couldn't withstand this strike. In an instant, Chu's fist broke through Sun's defense and was headed straight for his face. Sun was astonished at how Chu had played the battle, seizing his mistake and transitioning into a devastating attack. Chu's fist reached Sun's face. The essence of the technique was that upon impact, there was a surge of energy, increasing the strike's force, much like the Namgun fist technique. Thunderous explosion. A powerful burst of energy rippled through Sun, like a shockwave from an actual explosion. Thunderous rumbles echoed in all directions, as during a thunderstorm. Sun's body soared into a swift flight, only stopping upon colliding with one of the walls. Debris from the structure scattered in all directions. Sun lay beyond the breached wall, surrounded by fragments and parts of the wall. He was drained of strength but still conscious. All Sun managed was to mumble insults towards Chu. Gathering his strength, he managed to prop himself up on his elbow. Sun had heard that Chu was talented, but could a single glance really be enough to memorize how to manipulate chi within the body? Was this truly a talent bestowed by the heavens? As Sun was about to rise from the ground, Chu approached him, stating that it wasn't the end, and there was still more for him to learn. Chu began pummeling Sun, tears in his eyes. The moment Chu had been waiting for had finally arrived. Recalling the time when an adult son used to beat Chu, he felt justice being served. Chu practically radiated significance in this moment, relentlessly striking the fallen son. However, Sun, unable to endure the pain from the beating, started hurling insults at Chu bastard, son of a bitch. He felt like he might die from the pain. Suddenly, Chu paused for a moment. He was happy because his disciple had finally grasped how to channel his anger. What Sun was feeling now was indeed anger. Chu was now in his teacher's shoes, and his teacher was in his. Tears of joy welled up in Chu's eyes. After his words, Chu continued to berate Sun, who was no longer holding back in his expressions and screamed profanities, not understanding what was wrong with this insane bastard. Concluding the lesson, Chu decided to finish with a powerful uppercut, sending the battered Sun into the air. Sun blacked out. Weakling, Chu thought. Perhaps he should have given him the remaining precious spiritual plants to consume. But to find the second spiritual treasure, Chu had to track down a certain guy. The one who knew the location of the second spiritual treasure was Doxum, who would soon find himself in the prison of the Chongmu Alliance. His encounter with the Servant of Chaos was scheduled to occur in half a year. That's when the Servant of Chaos would search for the spiritual treasure. At that time, when he came to Doxum, Chu would appear at the right moment and decapitate him, preventing the coming of chaos at its inception. In such a case, Chu's suffering would come to an end, and he could live a normal life. But there's no guarantee that some unforeseen variable wouldn't emerge. Having finished his contemplation, Chu lifted the unconscious Sun. He still had work to do. Chu slung him over his shoulder, continuing his thoughts, understanding that he would need to be prepared for any unexpected turns. He had to train his damn teachers, just in case. Sun regained consciousness and immediately screamed. It felt like a horrible nightmare where he was beaten unconscious, but it wasn't a dream. He wondered how malicious a person had to be to strike another person so severely. But Sun knew he would seek revenge somehow. He would do whatever it takes to achieve retribution. As Sun voiced his thoughts aloud in the room, Chu entered. Sun's words about vengeance caught Chu's interest. He tried to dismiss it, but Chu clearly heard everything. Meanwhile, Chu approached Sun's bed and complained that he was too frail. Just a couple of strikes, and he was lying there for half a day. Chu delighted Sun by explaining to the elders that their duel had been a sparring match. Sun disagreed with defining their ordeal as sparring, but he wisely kept quiet. Chan recognized Chu's potential and how he could help his nephew become stronger. Chu then shared another piece of good news. They would train together now, as Chu could better instruct him. So now, Sun and Chu were together, alone. Their training began from that moment. Chu systematically beat Sun again and again for 10 days. For 10 days, Sun endured the beatings, unable to offer any meaningful resistance against Chu. But finally, Sun began showing progress. When he entered a rage, his strikes became more effective. Finally, Sun was infusing enough spiritual energy into his strikes. In just a few days, he grasped how to channel his anger into his sword. After all, pushing a person to the limit was a way to achieve rapid development. At this point, Chu decided to conclude training on channeling anger, evading a potentially more successful attack by Sun. It was time to move on to teaching the extraction of anger. With this, Chu struck Sun's chin with his foot. The blow sent Sun flying into the air. It was powerful enough, but not enough to knock him out or inflict severe damage. But to solidify the effects of the lesson, Chu decided to land a few punches as punishment for the missed strike. Yet in that moment, Sun's eyes ignited with fire, and Chu felt that Sun had experienced a breakthrough in understanding what Chu was teaching him. Twisting, Sun attempted a powerful strike at Chu, who easily dodged, though he was surprised. Sun was disappointed. He had hoped to finally punish his tormentor. However, Chu didn't let Sun dwell on his disappointment for long. Chu was already behind him, his fist poised for a strike. Sun knew that blow was coming and braced for the impact. Unexpectedly, Chu didn't strike him but suggested they take a walk outside the gates. Sun asked where Chu was going, only to realize he was being tested for insolence. Chu intended to teach him a lesson. Sun quickly caught on, graciously stepping aside to allow Chu to lead the way wherever he wanted. Amidst the market stalls, a beggar sat in worn clothes, collecting alms from sympathetic people. A straw hat on his head concealed his face. Suddenly, someone approached him, tossing a silver coin into his collection bowl, thus capturing the beggar's attention. The beggar thanked his benefactor, and the man only asked for a short conversation as gratitude. The man said that it was his first time in this city, and he didn't have any friends here yet. At the same time, using a special technique that concealed his words, he reported to his commander that he had been hiding under the guise of a beggar, and that there was no one named Jin in the Namgung estate. Pretending to continue the friendly dialogue, the commander, disguised as a beggar, inquired curiously as to why there was no one named Jin, finding it strange. The subordinate continued the report, mentioning that while there was no one named Jin in the estate, there was a new presence there who coincidentally matched the timing. He went on to explain that it was Yu Chu, the only son of Yu Wang. Currently, he was still in the estate. The commander was interested in further instructions on how to proceed, whether to call for reinforcements. Chu and Sun left the Namgung estate and headed deeper into the city, following a direction known only to Chu. By a strange twist of fate, they happened to pass by two Chaos servants who were discussing Chu. In the end, the Chaos Reconnaissance Commander decided to investigate everything currently with all the forces available to him. He didn't want to anger his master unnecessarily. No one wanted to keep their leader occupied, so they decided to keep an eye on Chu in order to gather more information about the thief. After concluding their conversation, the two individuals also decided to end their performance, which they had put on to divert attention. It was time to move on, and quickly. The subordinate left, and the commander also began getting ready. He still had a lot of tasks to attend to, especially considering he needed to personally oversee everything. Two people observed the beggar. They controlled this area, and this ragged individual wasn't paying them anything, despite receiving significant alms. Little did they know that he wasn't an ordinary homeless person. Chu bought a large number of books containing sad and touching stories, which Sun now carried. Since Sun was born into a wealthy family, he couldn't understand the poverty and pain of his kin. But for his training, he needed to experience these feelings. Having finished explaining to Sun, Chu decided it was time to go watch a Peking opera, something amusingly absurd. Sun understood their future plans, and his mood significantly improved. A dreamy smile appeared on his face. Joy brings tranquility to the soul and prevents anger and sorrow from overwhelming a person, Chu instructed. Sun wondered if it was truly possible to gain insight using such simple methods. Chu continued to explain that only someone who possesses tranquility can expand their horizons, thus improving their understanding of an opponent and their movements. A beggar infiltrated the theater, keeping an eye on Chu. Now that he could see Chu more clearly, he concluded that Chu was most likely the one who stole the ginseng. Through the field where agricultural crops swayed, a group of people moved, concealed by cloaks and wide-brimmed hats. This group was tasked with infiltrating the city secretly, eliminating the Namgung heir, while Chu was to handle their commander. The most important thing for them was to execute everything discreetly. But suddenly local thugs who protected the beggars confronted their commander. The commotion caught Chu's and Sun's attention. Looking around, they spotted a group of individuals who looked like thugs. This group was heading toward the beggar, intending to show him what happens to those who don't pay for the space they occupy. The commander had to call off the operation. The group of warriors halted, hiding amidst the tall vegetation. The commander was extremely displeased that the local thugs had targeted him at such an inopportune time. The problem was, he couldn't reveal himself. The thugs continued to accuse him and were getting ready to attack him. They surrounded the commander, forming a ring around him. He couldn't reveal himself. It seemed he would have to let himself be beaten if he didn't want to jeopardize the mission. The thugs turned their attention toward the beggar, planning to teach him a lesson about what happens to those who don't pay for their spot. The thugs rushed toward the beggar, fists raised, intending to use this simple method to explain the rules of their world. A brawl erupted in the alley. They knocked the beggar off his feet, sending him to the ground, and began beating him. Sun noticed this, and suggested to Chu that they should break up the fight, as it was unfair for a crowd to attack a single person like that. However, Chu had no intention of intervening. Justice doesn't always prevail in the world, as it does in books. This city is controlled by Namgung, but they rarely concern themselves with small gangs like this. They will continue to fight over this alley for a long time to come. These were low-level thugs, not associated with the world of Murim. There's no point in getting involved with them, that's for sure. In simpler terms, it's just another scuffle between gangsters for territory. Chu summed up the situation dismissively. As soon as Chu and Sun left, a sinister aura surrounded the thugs, and they stopped beating the beggar. Suddenly, one of the thugs was sent flying from the crowd due to a powerful blow. With no sign of the commander of the forces of chaos and trouble looming, the thugs realized they were in trouble. An intense malevolent energy emanated from the beaten beggar commander. The thugs began to back away, but they were already surrounded by people in dark cloaks. Ordering everyone not to interfere, the commander planned to deal with these wretches himself. The same wretches who had caused him so much suffering. Meanwhile, the leader of the thugs, in fear, ordered an attack on the seemingly unknown beggar.
He'll take full advantage of this dungeon with no other players to steal anything. Inside the dungeon, Ian finds the castle-like place to be a bit creepy. It's pretty simple dug, so it should be easy to navigate. Suddenly, as if to spite him, a wall crashes down as several monsters break through it to attack him. Macho uses an ice wave to slow them down. Ian realizes Lai can't use Berserk for a while, so he orders the wolf to just distract the monsters. While he does this, Ian brings out the full metal knuckles. The special ability activates, granting him Macho's ice wave ability. By using it, he manages to slow down the monsters again, while doing some decent damage too. The monsters, ghost drakes, react quite badly to this. As Ian orders Lai to take them out one by one, he realizes they're attack-focused monsters with low defense and HP. He wants to take them out quickly, but Ian and Lai are forced to dodge when multiple drakes attack at once. Turning to Squishy, Ian tells him to attack the monsters and distract them. The turtle obeys his master's order and walks up to the monsters before getting inside his shell. The drakes start attacking mindlessly over and over again, doing no more than 1 HP of damage at a time. While they're distracted, Ian, Lai, and Macho take the opportunity to bum rush the dragon knockoffs. Once the drakes are defeated, Ian can't help but notice this dungeon feels different from normal ones. Something about it is just off. Right as he says this, a summoning magic circle appears behind him, something that usually signals the appearance of a boss monster. Talk about a rough day at the office. Weirdly enough, what comes out of the circle is no monster, but an old man. Ian wonders if he's a ghost of some sort when he speaks up. Laying eyes on Ian, the man says that he must be a summoner, putting Ian on guard. Stranger danger, folks. The man doesn't seem to be hostile, so Ian decides to act neutral for the moment. The old man mutters to himself that it may be fate that the first one to challenge Oakley's test is a summoner. At Ian's question, he tells the boy that he himself is in fact Oakley. Ian asks more questions, but Oakley tells him he can't give him any answers yet. If Ian passes his test, then and only then will the secrets of this dungeon be his. With that, he holds his staff out and releases a burst of magic. With a boom in his voice that doesn't match his elderly appearance, Oakley calls out to the Drake of Chaos. From behind Ian and his minions, yet another wall crashes apart as a monster enters. Carpenters must make a fortune around here. This is a level 75 hero-class monster, the Chaos Drake. With his minions barely being over level 40, Ian starts panicking. Before he can do anything, the Drake lets loose a roar that activates a fear effect. For the next 10 minutes, all Ian's stats are reduced by 5%. At this rate, it doesn't seem like he has a chance, but damned if he's going to go down without a fight at least. At Oakley's command to attack, the Drake starts spewing fire breath from its mouth. Ian orders his minions to spread out to avoid taking damage. With most of the room now on fire, the four are separated. Behind cover, Ian is terrified by how much damage the Drake is capable of doing. Even Squishy's health was reduced by a third. However, if it's the same as the previous Drakes, it must be a fully attack-focused monster with low health and defense. Ian can't capitalize on this knowledge though, since the Drake starts attacking again. With a single swipe of its tail, it puts Macho in critical condition. This forces Ian to unsummon him. Next up is Lai. He fares a bit better, being able to get some critical hits in with weakness detection. Unfortunately, the Drake catches on to their tactics before long. With a twirl of its massive body, it slams its tail into Lai, sending him crashing into a wall. Ouch! Right as the Chaos Drake is about to launch another attack on Lai, Ian screams out in fear and uses spatial distortion to switch places with him. Right before using spatial distortion, Ian was able to grab Squishy and bring him forward to use his shell as a shield. He still takes about 100 HP damage, but it's far better than the alternative. After gathering his thoughts, Ian orders forth Lai once again. The wolf lands critical hit after critical hit on the Drake, doing plenty of damage. Despite all this, the Drake's HP isn't even at the halfway point yet. No one ever said this would be a fair fight. While Lai attacks from the front, the Drake decides to go for Ian, who's barking orders from the sideline. With yet another tail whip, it sends Ian flying at a wall, which he slams into full force. Despite using Squishy's shell as a shield again, he takes a ton of damage from the slam. At this point, Ian can't help but think there's no way for them to win here. He'll die and lose a full level, all his stats, and not to mention get locked out of the game for 24 hours. Even knowing all this, he can't help but put something else first. Regardless of anything else, he has to get Lai out of here. After everything they've been through, he can't push the wolf any further when the Drake could kill him. Right as he prepares to unsummon Lai and face his own death, Ian sees his first minion do something that shocks him. By attacking ferociously in a spot where the Drake has already been injured, he's able to do a ton of bonus damage. Ian is surprised he didn't notice this before, but chalks it up to being a new game feature. I mean, it's kinda common sense, man. With a series of vicious attacks, Lai is finally able to bring the Chaos Drake to under half HP. That's not quite as great as it sounds. After all of that, they only just managed to take out half the monster's health. They're so screwed. Knowing this, Ian unsummons Lai and prepares to die at the hands of the Drake. The most he can do right now is stay on his feet until the end. As the Drake dashes towards Ian and he brings up Squishy as his shield, Oakley finally speaks up and unsummons the Drake. A system pop-up tells Ian he cleared the Dungeon of Chaos and has reached level 43. As it turns out, the Drake was unbeatable right from the start. Oakley's test wasn't to defeat it, but rather to prove one's ability as a summoner. Since Ian has done this, Oakley makes an offer. If Ian would like it, he'll take him on as a pupil. A pop-up reveals the full details of this. By accepting Oakley's request, Ian will have his class changed from Taming Master to Dragon Tamer. This is yet another hidden class. Duh, what's a tough decision? Ian figures that it's quite obvious what the best choice is. Taming Master was a class given to him right from the start of this character's life. Dragon Tamer, on the other hand, is a class that's a reward for such a high difficulty dungeon he barely got through it. So naturally, Dragon Tamer must be the better one, right? With this reasoning, he accepts Oakley's offer. The old man summons forth a magic circle and begins the spell to change Ian's class and fails. The spell simply doesn't work. A system pop-up tells Ian that you can't switch to a lower level class. Yes, that master title isn't for nothing. When Oakley realizes the reason for the spell's failure, he's quite shocked. To think Ian is already walking the master's path. Of course, he wouldn't be able to become a mere Dragon Tamer after that. As the two discuss this matter, Ian comes to know that Lai possesses strength far beyond that of his kind. Without Ian's training skill, he could have never reached the level of power he currently has. That aside, Oakley remembers why exactly he was waiting in this dungeon for a summoner. Turning away, he tells Ian to follow him. Meanwhile, Yu Yun and the others have managed to upgrade their base to a full village. Lotus Village with Yu Yun as its chief. As the others celebrate this achievement, Yu Yun wonders what Ian's doing right now. Dude worries about him more than a wife. He's suffering. He's suffering a lot. Ian's barely slept 2 hours a night for 5 days now, thanks to the quest he accepted from Oakley. Flashback time, back in the dungeon. Oakley told Ian that all who clear his dungeon are given a mandatory mission. This is the quest, Traces of the Forgotten Ancient Monster. Oakley is actually a legendary dragon tamer from 1,000 years ago. Back then, Oakley was the leader of the Dragon Tamers. With him was his minion, the war dragon Carseus. However, evil dragons attacked the Dragon Tamers, slaughtering them all. Oakley alone survived and escaped to Crupier Snow Mountain. Here, he sealed himself and Carseus' souls under the mountain. Oakley's duty now is to bring Carseus and his line of dragons back to life. Since he's only a soul now, that duty is the quest Ian must undertake. He gives Ian the Divine Dragon's Soul Stone and tells him to find the Dimensional Sorcerer. He will be able to tell Ian how to revive Carseus with the stone. He'd be able to do it without the Sorcerer, but since he can't take the Dragon Tamer class, this is the only way. Before Ian leaves, Oakley also gives him a reward, the Dragon Tamer's feather accessory. Though it's sealed now, the Dimensional Sorcerer can unlock it and allow Ian to use his true powers. Powers that have been passed down to the leader of the Dragon Tamers for generations. With that, his soul's duty is done and he finally drifts off to rest in peace. Curious, Ian opens the feather's status window. What he sees is far from anything he could have expected. The feather is a legendary rank item. Ian is overwhelmed by the amount of benefit